I am Dr. Ross Hoehn with Pison Technology. The talk title is a little different than that which appears in the pamphlet. That was kind of an intentional last-minute decision because I do want to focus on that word democratizing a metric. I think a lot of the statistics that we are seeing are statistics collected at a particular skill level. I want to focus on providing metrics and statistics and tools to all skill levels. So I think that's the impetus behind that change. We are a team of 3 that are here today. So I am me, bachelor's, master's, and PhD from Purdue, focused mainly in computational physics. I've worked in machine learning in the defense sector for about 10 years. Moved to Pison, where I'm a principal investigator, both on the defense side and the sports ops side at the moment. We have Donovan, who I know to be upstairs right there. He has 24 years experience in professional baseball as a strength and performance coach for the Guardians, the Blue Jays, as well as the New York Yankees. And he is our director of sports performance at Pison. At Dexter, we will get to in a moment. I think we have one more sneaky person down here, Zach Sorensen, that I want to call out, who is a cognitive and mental performance SME for us within Pison, presently working as the cognitive coach for the Cincinnati Reds. So who are we? That's kind of where Dexter's story comes in. We are now 8 years old. We are a spin out of MIT. So our founding partners each had family members that at that time, tragically at that time, were suffering from various stages of ALS. And the impetus of the company was to provide an assistive technology originally for ALS patients, whereas their neurodegenerative disease progresses, it becomes harder for them to move. So we developed a very specialized chip, a very specialized spatially distributed electromyography chip. That's kind of where the company got started. That electromyography plus machine learning enabled us to do gesture control with very, very low signal. The military got interested in that for various applications. But over the years, we've kind of kept our heart very, very buried in a research tool aimed to assist MS patients, Parkinson's patients, and ALS patients. So that's our history. But knowing that we have developed a new sensory chip that is small enough to go in every wearable that's on the market, our intent was to put that chip in every wearable on the market. And in the past 2 years, we have gotten agreements for most of the existing wearable companies, and I'll highlight specifically Samsung. Timex will be coming out with a new digital watch in the next 2 years featuring this chip, with the intent of providing not only our surface EMG, but a bevy of other sensors all on a single chip on every wearable. And the intent is to open up a great deal of sensing to the market that they can figure out what to do with, right? Like most of these platforms like Samsung use an open API. So we're going to populate that open API with not just one sensor, but a family of sensors. But today, we are going to focus on some of our sports ops work. So kind of as a brief outline to what we'll be going through is the why. So why Pison cares about this problem. The how are we measuring the effects that we are seeing? The what, how does it apply specifically in this case to baseball, but in the broadest sense to a large bevy of problems that are psychometric in nature. So they are cognitive, plus skill, plus physiology, and kind of end it with a kind of call to action and ask, because we are actively looking for as many partners and exploration avenues as possible. So Pison's motivation. So about 2 years ago, a year into my stay at Pison, we were very much focused on gesture control and defense. Then we recognized that we can put more chips that are available on any wearable that is in this room, more sensors on a single chip. So we kind of flirted with the idea of becoming our own healthcare wearable company. which is something that's still being flirted with inside the company, but we're very much focused on empowering the other wearables. It's a very crowded market. But our CEO has a son who has gone through high school travel teams to college ball. He was very much interested in exploring this problem, and it kind of has become the biggest business unit in our very small company. I was kind of brought into the team. I'm a physicist. I've done defense work. I know less about baseball than anybody else in this room. But about a year ago, I was brought onto the team, and, you know, as a researcher, the first question that I ask is, what should I be reading, right? Like, what are the articles? What are the books? You go to Amazon, you don't even get to question if baseball is a cognitive and mental sport, right? Half the publications that are available for sale on baseball are coaching you in these topics. I've read maybe half of these. The bottom row, 3 to the right, these are some of my favorites down here. The 90% mental, I like that. So this is kind of where we got started. Like, we are starting to care about how cognition can be measured and how it can directly be tied to performance in specific events, right? In this case, baseball. In military sense, it's general, you know, occupational duty as well as marksmanship. So more motivation. So going to the Amazon pages, looking for what to read, like, you can't help but take the stances, I believe, the players and the coaches. This has to be a cognitive game. There has to be a mental aspect. And who can argue with Yogi Berra, right? He is our quote factory in the sport of baseball. He says it's 90% mental and the other half is physical. I will believe him. So our intent is to understand that any activity like this is a kind of a confluence of mental skills, cognitive skills, and mental skills can be trained. And that was a question that was asked to somebody yesterday, right? Like, are we trying to deficit people who maybe don't have the exact measurement? And the answer is no, and I'll probably love a question about that later. Then there's game skills that are on top of that, which is the element that I think appends itself to that mental level question, right? If you do not have the score right now, can you achieve it? The answer is yes. So what we are doing is wanting to track players' readiness through a simple psychometric valuation that provides insights in the end to their on-field performance. So on board our wearable, which we have right now as a Pison wearable, which will be available on any wearable that you can purchase over the next few years, are a few psychometric tests. This is a lot of text. Don't bother trying to read it all. We have a simple reaction time test. The device produces a light. You react to the light just by opening your hand, right? Simple as that. We're using the surface EMG to detect that hand opening, not an IMU. That affords us some fanciness. We can detect the signal of your movement prior to your hand moving. So we are getting your actual decision to reaction time, not complicated by any downstream motion. We have a go, no-go test, which we will also talk about today. That go, no-go test provides 2 lights. If the light is amber, don't do anything. If the light is white, flick your wrist and react. Simple as that. We're getting at the speed it takes you to accurately make the correct decision in the moment. The third test we won't really touch on today is a PVT test. It is a longer duration test to kind of test your ability to focus in an instance where the test is extraordinarily kind of boring. So how able are you to focus on the test through boredom and against distractions going on around you? So this will be the last bit of pumping that we have going on. So this chart is a little dated, and this speaks to the number of sensors we're bringing on a single chip to all the wearables. Your wearables today all have IMUs. They all have PPGs. These are technologies that the market has learned to sap dry. Like, we are maximally using these sensors. What we're bringing to the table now is our EMG, which on this table is labeled ENG because we like to call it neurography and not myography. A medical grade ECG on the device, a temperature sensor, which Whoop and Aura now have, so this chart is a little dated, and a galvanic skin response sensor, all packaged on everyone's wrist. Players, non-players, warfighters, non-warfighters. So we have this device coupled with an application that allows you to do tracking. So we're basically running the experiment with our device focused, in this case, very much just on that simple reaction time test. Our inspiration, and this very much speaks to yesterday's presentation by Professor Finneman, is measuring how these cognitive elements affect and address on-field or in-game performance. So our inspiration was this paper, which was 2004 out of Kyoto. They looked at the go, no-go decision-making time for various experience levels of players and found that, you do have bands of skill plus no-go reaction times that very well correlate within the bands to player performance. They also did a longitudinal element, which showed that over time, individuals that were, contemporaneously at the high school level, as they were going through training into the college level, they transitioned from that high school performance band on the test to the college performance band on that test, showing that this fast-paced decision-making, this cognitive skill, is trainable. So this is not something that is inborn, although they do suggest that the simple reaction time is not different between players and not players, and we ourselves in Pison have found that it is pretty much a personalized commodity. So we have to understand that there's a difference between your actual reaction time and your fast-paced decision-making, which is built on top of your simple reaction time. So who did we have? We had a few teams that had a bevy of players with our devices for an entire season. Oral Roberts, West Virginia, Auburn, Penn State, and Oklahoma all had our devices to varying degrees. When we started doing the performance analysis, one of the things that we did is remove all of the individuals that had fewer than 25 at-bats that season. We felt like that statistic was not stable enough at that point to draw any correlative statistics. We opted to remove Oral Roberts players just so we had a clean bevy of D1 school performing, or Power 5, I should say, performing athletes, just to prevent things like Simpson's paradoxes showing up in the data. So we didn't have multiple populations kind of cutting through. We also removed players that were inconsistent with taking their SRT tests on the device. We did not have stable metrics throughout the season on them. So as a small business, we needed to kind of shrink ourselves down to a reliable data set. So what's that leave us with? That left us with 56 players distributed across 5 Power 5 teams, not enough to do, positional play slices or anything fancy like that. So we kind of applied the KISS principle, and we're just going to take the entire group en masse. The average at-bats for the people that we had left after removing the 25 or fewer was 150 at-bats for that season. I feel like that's a stable statistic for the season level. And they were, again, vetted for diligence on taking that SRT. So we were very confident in their simple reaction time measures across the season. So we're going to go through 6 boring charts rather quickly. So knowing that we're trying to understand how an individual's cognitive performance, in this case SRT, can map to their gameplay, we need to look at the first, very individual performance statistics. And there's nothing better than the simple batting average, right? This is how one player performs at a bat. The OBP and the slugging, these are very similar numbers. These are performant at base, at bat numbers for a given individual in a game. So we can see that the simple reaction time itself, the clustering doesn't look super pretty in my opinion, but I'm a physicist. I'm used to laboratory data. I'm also used to, Pearson's numbers very high in lab data. So I have to swallow the fact that this is an in the wild study And 0.5 and north is a pretty good in the wild correlation coefficient. So our simple reaction time measures have north of 0.5 for batting average on bases and almost 0.5 for your slugging numbers. So this speaks to probably not the whole story, but your simple reaction time is a building block on which a player's performance is constructed. The faster your simple reaction time, and this again is not to dissuade people, again, I want that question, not to dissuade people, but that simple reaction time is an inborn ability to perform faster. So if you're talking about batting, you're talking about building your decision on top of your reaction time. That reaction time is the foundation for your total decision-making time. We did a bevy of SABR metrics in this study. So these three in particular, these are just downstream. I'm going to say the word derivative. The physicist in me is going to remind you I'm not talking about DDT. I'm just talking about downstream performance analytics. These three values showed up exceptionally high in the correlation coefficient as well, all north of 0.5, but importantly, they're downstream statistics and measures from the things we saw in the first slide. So even down to, what is your at-bat performance with respect to fields and times of day, right? So these are derivative information from the previous slide. So the conclusion of this little portion, and I do have some more time to waste after this, don't worry, is that your total decision time is how we'll refer it. Your total decision time foundationally has a component of inborn reaction time. Your reaction time does at root correlate heavily to your on-field performance. The next leg of what we want to look at, and we would love to find partners to collect that data from, is using that go, no-go test and the SRT test. So we have an ability to subtract from the decision-making time that individual's reaction time and get exactly to how fast that person is making a decision. I honestly think that is going to have a higher correlation than these 0.5s, which are already sitting pretty. I did just want to show the one plot that we have that is in the opposite direction of the fit. And that is, your strikeout percentages. So everything pretty much suggests the faster you are, the better you're scoring. This just happens to be in the other way because it's counting a negative. So here is a large and ugly table of all of the things that we did calculate. The highlighted quantities are the ones we kind of already discussed, but we did intentionally attempt to correlate things that we knew would be nonsense statements. So games played, plate appearances, and at-bats. There is some of this built in there because you're making these decisions based on performance, but there's a lot of decision that goes into this that is not just how well this person has done in the past 3 practices. So the fact that we see very little correlation in those gets me confident that we're just not going to correlate to all of the things all the time, which I'm comfortable with. But other statistics like ISO and WRAA, these statistics inbreed other elements of the game that are going on with the batter's performance. So like WRAA is typically used as like a luck performance statistic, right? It incorporates things that are going on outside of the batter's control. So I am happy to see that this is less performant and less correlative in our case because it is less speaking to just the individual's performance. Other cool things that we have going on, and I will blast through these super quickly. With the 101st Airborne, we have done a long-term fatigue study as they go through simulated missions. This speaks to baseball in the case of travel teams, long practices over time. What we've seen is that in this bottom plot that is, none of these are super pretty, but this bottom plot, we see the fatigue level of the individuals in the unit build up over time. And then when these crash, we had no idea what was going on. We just gave them devices and we're like, what went on August 4th? That was a recreation day. So they paused the simulated mission. They gave them a day of rest. We're able to measure the difference between that building up of physical fatigue to the point of you now have rest. The same thing happened the 18th and the 19th. That collapse, we're able to just observe rest days for this unit. We're also able to absorb and understand fatigue in long days. So we've done, this was a multiple day exercise. We've also done this in 18+ hour helicopter exercises. And we're able to see within just that exercise, that is this lower right plot here, the collapse of somebody's readiness in terms of how fatigued they are within a single event. Other things we want to explore. This is my pitch to the audience slide. So we are presently leveraging PVT for training and intervention with Lansing. We've done an amazing set of 9 physical interventions. This will probably be our presentation next year. And we're able to determine which pregame interventions are most effective for a given individual and which are more effective for in-game performance at that event. We also have quite an exquisite anxiety measurement down to the 5-minute level. We are able to tell you how anxious a person is. So this has applications that we would love to explore with anybody who wants to reach out. We have physical metrics that we are exploring. So pop time tests, sprinting tests as well. We're also looking at using the IMUs to kind of explore 3-dimensional space mapping of a player. So placing multiple devices on a player. We're also looking at, and this is kind of very aligned with this go, no-go decision stuff, Lansing Community College is letting us explore the hell out of them. They are using these devices like masters. I would call out Coach Cutter at Lansing Community College. He has been a godsend. What we're looking at is now that we know that a person can be measured performantly on their fast-paced decision-making, can we use that go, no-go test immediately before the activity, so in this case, batting, to pump them up into the mental state to do better. So an active little test that they can take 90 seconds before they get on deck that would increase their performance after the fact. Presently, I called out Lansing. Presently, we're also working with Prep Baseball. They're interested in looking at us for additional metrics to inform scouting. But more importantly, I want to have conversations. So anybody who wants to reach out, I want to hear your ideas on how you would use this stuff. I've got this ugly old.
When I was looking at the correlation, it seemed to me that it, clearly wasn't perfect. So you had some outliers where you had high averages and you had, the mental was low. And so my thinking is, have you ever followed up? Because if they have such high averages, that maybe they have great exit velocity. And have you followed up to see, and if you improve that mental, they'd be an incredible player. Have you followed up on something like that?
So we haven't, and that is totally what we want to do with the go, no go. We want a larger bevy of subjects so we can start doing that kind of slicing. But that was kind of the question I was also waiting for, because that speaks to, like, if I reverse your question's wording, would something like this be used to dissuade a player from engaging in a higher level of competition? And to me, I think the answer comes from the classic movie in 1996, Space Jams. So one of the selected players by the aliens happened to be the 5'3" Muggsy Bogues, who was the 14th number draft pick in his opening year in 1987, had 49 blocks in his NBA career at 5'3", but he had a 44-inch vertical at 5'3". He played like nobody else on the field. So if I take what your SRT is as some kind of inherent baseline, my response is maybe you don't play like everybody else, right? Maybe you have a different mode of play. Maybe instead of swinging at anything that you think you can get a piece of, you sit there and patiently wait for the right pitch. You change your game and you can be excellent in your own way.
All right, thanks. That was a really fun talk. So I have like a brief comment and then a question. I think in that K-rate plot, you have a very high leverage point to the upper right that I think is driving a lot of that correlation.
Yep.
So like, I'm not entirely convinced it actually is going the other way. I mean, I would remove that and see if the correlation, or see if that,
And you're specifically talking to the strikeout?
yeah, the K-rate plot that you showed. Yeah, if you want to go back to that. The one that you said might have been going in the other direction, it was forward. Yeah,
was
so
K,
you've got a
yeah.
high leverage point, that blue point up in the right, and I think if you remove that, you might actually see it going the other way, so.
And honestly, like I see a deviation in the population a little bit. There's a little bit of a valley in the density. This
Uh-huh.
could be an honest Simpson's paradox as well.
Hmm. So my question then was about like, so you called reaction time inborn. I don't know if that was just a kind of a throwaway descriptor, but is like by inborn, do you mean, is this something that does not change, that's not trainable? And then, so this is kind of a question about clarification. So would the point of training then be to bring decision time down in line with reaction time? And like, is that
Yes.
what those books that you initially showed are trying to teach us to do?
Yeah. So what we've seen internally in Pison, so we're going to speak to Pison and then this paper, a person's SRT is very difficult, if at all, to change. It's a non-trainable. So innate would be a descriptor of that, right? Your reaction time happens to be your reaction time. What Kidda showed here is that a player at the higher level, so as they're moving through training, their decision time asymptotically approaches their simple reaction time. So it is kind of a quantity built on top of the SRT itself.
Great stuff. Really, really interesting. I had a question. Most of what you're doing, or really all of what you're doing, is event centered, right? It's centered at the plate appearance, right? If you zoom back out, is there anything that you can do, or is it embedded in what you're doing, or is it just adjacent that would get at learning agility and adaptability?
Yep.
So this skill of being able to take information in and use it and incorporate it into actions going forward. Again, it's not necessarily at the event level, it's more zoomed out. What's your thoughts on that?
So, speaking on behalf of the company, we're a metric device, so we can support development of curriculum prior to the event to assist it and identifying the people that need a particular type of curriculum, right? So if we go to even the batting average plots, right? We do have a tight correlation with batting average and simple reaction time, but what I see when I look at this plot is a cluster of people that are rather fast, but have low batting averages. These are people that need particular types of training in their behavior to pull them up to what I would expect them to perform at. And in the other case, slower players, like I said, waiting for the right pitch and understanding what your pitch looks like. Yeah, 100% we can support that. Sure.
Sorry to keep it in this corner. But just a general question of, I guess, diversity and your overall client pool. Have you thought to include women in softball and to see if they kind of have similar numbers? And then also expanding past obviously Power 5, and I saw that you are working with community colleges as well, but different races and different people who are subject to maybe less baseball structure, who are really learning the game but are overly athletic. Just something, that's a question.
Yes. So yes to all fronts. So we're presently doing a study with Auburn University focused on using our simple reaction time test pre and post possible head injuries to tag players that possibly received a concussion during play. Not softball, but their women's volleyball team is their most injurious team at the university. Shocked me. But yes, so SRT values for women, age group by age group, tend to be about 20 milliseconds shorter than male counterparts, something that we know about. We just don't have any females built into this study because it's Power 5 men's baseball teams.
Okay, awesome, thanks. As a Woot wearer for the last 2 years, I appreciated it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.